Do you know the truth that hardly anyone has the courage to tell you? The more you chase, the more he pulls away. And no, this has nothing to do with playing games. It has to do with energy, perception of value, and above all, the way you see yourself. The problem begins when your self-esteem is low. Your need for approval is at an all-time high, and you believe, even without realizing it, that you need to shape yourself, give too much of yourself, and even cancel yourself out in order to be loved. But let me tell you something you may never have been told. Men value those who value themselves. Men respect those who respect themselves. And as long as you don't understand that, you'll continue to be trapped in this cycle of emotional dependence, where you give everything and get almost nothing. And look, that's not love. It's emotional overload, emptiness, and exhaustion. If you're tired of begging for love, living in unbalanced relationships, not being a priority, and always feeling in the background, stay with me until the end. Because today, you're going to understand, once and for all, how to turn this game around and become a woman who doesn't beg, but who is naturally valued, desired, and chosen. You know, it all starts here. If a woman doesn't see herself, doesn't prioritize herself, and doesn't value herself, the world doesn't see her either. When she lives with wounded self-esteem, immersed in emotional insecurity and emotional dependence, her energy communicates exactly that. And what happens? She ends up attracting love relationships where she has to beg for love, fight for scraps, and beg for attention, without ever feeling truly chosen. And that's exactly where the silent error lies. When she begins to put herself first, to practice self-love and self-worth in a real way, not as a speech, but as an attitude, everything begins to change. This means asking yourself every day, what am I doing for myself today? Am I prioritizing myself, or just chasing someone who doesn't even know if they want me? A woman's appreciation is born when she understands that she doesn't have to cancel herself out in order to be loved. And look, this isn't motivational talk, it's emotional strategy. A woman who has emotional intelligence, who cultivates self-confidence, who knows how to set emotional limits, and who doesn't accept just anything, automatically becomes a rare woman. And you know what's funny? Men notice. They sense when they're not dealing with someone who accepts crumbs, and that's exactly when they start to change their behavior. Because yes, those who see themselves are seen. There is something extremely magnetic about a woman who has a life of her own. When she doesn't revolve around a man, when she has her own projects, her own routine, her own hobbies, her own support network, she overflows with self-love. And that, my friend, is infinitely more attractive than any effort to please. Men notice and are charmed when they understand that they are not the center of her universe. You know that woman who disappears for a while because she's focused on the gym, work, therapy, her friends, or simply taking care of herself? She awakens something rare, respect and admiration. Because unlike relationships where there is emotional dependence, she isn't there to fill an emotional need, but to share, not to cancel herself out. This completely changes the dynamics of romantic relationships. And if you think about it, it's exactly the opposite of what you were taught. They told you that you always had to be available, that you had to give of yourself to be loved. But in practice, it's when you focus on being his priority that he starts to look at you differently. Because those who realize that you don't accept unbalanced relationships understand that, in order to be in your life, they need to offer you something more than crumbs. And from here, everything starts to change. There's a truth that few women have the courage to face. You teach how you want to be treated. And this isn't motivational talk. It's pure reality. When you don't set limits, when you accept less than you deserve, when you tolerate a lack of respect, a lack of presence, or any sign of disinterest, the message you send is simple. It's okay to treat me like this. And therein lies the root of many frustrating love relationships. Do you know that discomfort that comes with the thought of saying, "I don't accept that"? It comes precisely from the emotional insecurity and emotional dependence that have made you believe that setting limits is scary. In fact, it's the lack of them that's scary. When you firmly and calmly communicate what is acceptable to you, without shouting, without drama, but with emotional intelligence, you activate something powerful in the other person: respect. And look, setting limits doesn't mean being rude, or playing games, or pulling away to provoke. It's simply showing that if he wants to be in your life, he needs to know how to live with a woman who has self-esteem, self-respect, who isn't willing to give herself up to be loved. Because a woman who understands her own value doesn't negotiate what is non-negotiable. And curiously, this is where the tables turn. There is a silent rule in love relationships that many women ignore. Those who always make themselves available become predictable and lose value in the eyes of those who don't know how to offer reciprocity. And no, this has nothing to do with emotional games, but rather with emotional intelligence and self-worth. When you're always ready, you always respond on time, you always go for it. You transmit, without realizing it, a message that he doesn't need to make an effort after all. You're always there. Strategic emotional distancing isn't about moving away to punish or provoke. It's about understanding that too much presence, when it's not reciprocated, becomes banality. And you know what's worse? It generates emotional exhaustion, a feeling of emptiness, and once again, throws you into the old trap of emotional dependence. When you choose not to respond immediately, when you take a step back to look after yourself, to live your life, he notices. And he notices hard. And what a curious thing. Men are much more attracted to what they don't take for granted. So instead of trying to prove that you deserve love, try being selective. Be that woman who has such an interesting life, so full of self-love and self-confidence, that he understands. Either he values you or he loses you. And yes, that changes everything. Here's a turning point that completely transforms your love life, your self-esteem, and your feminine self-confidence. You're not in this world to be chosen. You're here to choose too. When a woman understands this, she stops accepting crumbs, toxic relationships, and any kind of bond that feeds her affective neediness or emotional insecurity. She realizes that she wasn't born to beg for love, but to earn respect, self-respect, and healthy relationships. Think about it. How many times have you found yourself hoping to be validated, to be a priority, to be seen? This puts you in a position of begging, of accepting anything just so you don't feel rejected. And do you know what happens? Your value plummets, your energy gets heavy, and you plunge into a cycle of self-neglect that only distances you from the powerful woman you are. This is when you need to look in the mirror and ask yourself, am I choosing or just accepting? When you come to understand that you too have the power to decide, that you too can look and say, this doesn't fit, your vibration changes. And believe me, he notices. Because a woman who has emotional limits, who has self-love, who values herself, and knows exactly what she wants, doesn't beg, doesn't negotiate her value, she simply chooses. And that's when everything starts to change. So, answer me this, in all honesty. How long are you going to accept being treated as a second option? How long are you going to live in this cycle of giving too much of yourself, carrying relationships on your back, ignoring your own limits, and in the end, reaping nothing but frustration, neediness, and that cruel feeling of not being enough? The truth is, my friend, that as long as you don't value yourself, no one will do it for you. What you've learned here today isn't just about relationships. It's about personal redemption. It's about you choosing, every day, to treat yourself as a priority, to strengthen your self-esteem, your self-love, and to understand that you weren't born to beg for love. You were born to be respected, admired, and above all, loved in a light, reciprocal, and healthy way. And yes, that starts within you. Now tell me in the comments, which of these attitudes do you realize you most need to start applying in your life? Tell me here, because I really want to know. And of course, if this content made sense to you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, activate the notification bell, and share this video with someone who also needs to hear this. Because your transformation begins the moment you truly choose not to accept less than you deserve.